The basic problem is that there is a big difference between the school of the past times and the school of the modern teaching method. At the time the teacher taught by example and was a cause of force majeure, because the shop had to survive and had to produce, and whoever responds directly to it was the master. In the school shop, let's say, that the pupils could not take time away from the teacher for explanations and, generally, they either produced or, if they did not produce, they were forced to leave. Likewise, if they did not leave, they operated, but they had to collaborate with the master. In the modern school, set among us, there is no clear production goal. Who is the judge is always the professor. Nothing happens, even if the students do not learn anything. Indeed, in most cases, it is said, that does not understand anything, that is rejected. In the film we just have to cry we see a boy who had failed since the beginning of the year. Then the very fact that we explain in words, even very complex facts, assuming, more often than not, that students know at least the terms used by us, and if they don't know them we don't care. It brings us back to a teaching that is more an exam than a teaching. The fact that, in the film, Leonardo da Vinci is subjected to a continuous examination, from the card game, to the fact of the fever, which, as soon as the temperature of the body is wrong, which rises to 38, says but looks there is nothing. And there is almost a deformation, albeit unconscious, of the teacher to guarantee a detachment between him and the students. In the school, if the student surpassed the teacher, it was a matter of gratitude on the part of the master. Think of the story of the disciple who, charged by the master to pay attention so that the flies did not land on the painting, just finished. As soon as the master leaves, he paints a fly. On his return, the master goes wild, but then, as soon as he realizes that the fly is not real, but is painted, he congratulates the disciple. But this because he knew very well that, with good disciples, the quality of the school and the workshop improved, and this meant a greater income in production. Returning, for a moment, to the speech started at the beginning, who is brought and who is not brought for engineering studies. Clearly this does not depend on the 2-year period, but, in my opinion, it essentially depends on basic training, for a period ranging from 5 up to, at most, 15 years. I don't know if you remember the film Una Rolls-Royce GIALLA, where the butler, quite professional, when asked, how long it takes to form someone like you, answers, very little, madam, just a generation. And in fact it must be recognized that all those who assert themselves professionally, at least as a general rule, have begun to breathe the air of the profession, from an early age. It is appropriate to quote Schumacher, who started driving at 3 years of age, albeit in non-Formula 1 cars, and so on. Personally, looking a little back, in my elementary school, between 1st and 2nd grade, all I remember is nuns who reached my hand if I wrote with my left hand. I was left-handed, and they used to write with my right hand. And, in the 2nd grade, I always remember the scene of the teacher who, taking a boy by the ears, slammed his head against the wall. In 3rd grade, Let's say that, since I was in Foggia and, thanks to the bombing, the house we lived in had been destroyed. I was with my mother and sister for a year with my grandmother. Here, in front of the house, there was a carpenter's shop. Here we see him when he was young, but I have known him in age. I do not say advanced, but later in the years. And I spent hours and hours seeing how it worked. Those were the days when there were no electric machines, no electric saws. Everything worked with handwork. I remember that to cut a table, large enough, they were two. He spent time, he did it on the street, with saws of this type. And it was great to see how he worked, because he worked with passion and conviction, equipped with various tools, but all manual, such as the planers, which we see here. He did everything from rough work, to furniture, to dead boxes, which were not the death boxes of the Far West, but they were authentic copies of wooden sculptures. And so there were many other shops, like the Potter. It was great to see people who stopped to observe. We are in times of war. Fortunately, the school was not working, because the institutes had been occupied by the Americans and the boys had a lot of free time to stop and observe these things. As I said before, there was the potter, who with a lathe, let's say homemade, was able to churn out all kinds of Clayworks. So the bakers and gradually. And all this came in handy during my studies too. At the university, as regards plastic models, photomontages and various things. Certainly there was no course on how a model is made, on how to make a photograph. In the most crucial things, the student remained isolated. He had to get by himself. And one learns more in this way than by repeating a series by heart, the facts of which one is not even so convinced. At 30, when I had a studio all to myself, I wanted to design a furniture and make it on a 1-to-1 scale. But because the needs were particular, because I needed to make a frame of the wall to put the projector and cover it with a picture, which I had made myself, because I needed a drawer to put the projector and connect it to the stereophonic recorder, which also controlled the slide projector, and a decent mockery, of which I had made the frame with plastic, because of that size did not exist, and I made a screen as I said, because you couldn't call the bricklayer to make a panel, which he would have done in his own way, a carpenter who would have made the furniture in his own way. I was still working with chipboard. However, I had reached an environment that satisfied me. Then when the studio was turned into a home, starting from the terrace, which had remained unused, everything has been exploited, square centimeter by square centimeter, both as regards the exterior and the interior. I organized a small carpentry shop, a small workshop, with a built-in closet containing all the tools, on the model of those that existed in all the houses in the past. Because, especially in the mountains, in downtime, people worked and took care of their home. This fact is fundamental for a cultural fact. It's like cars. Those who understand and manage at least to take care of and not neglect their car, keep it better and drive it better. So as regards the interior of the house, it required a scheduled intervention. The formwork of the table, which protrudes from the floor on the basis of 13 by 30 centimeters, I made it personally. The bricklayers could not be trusted. who made, on the terrace, a table that was supposed to be in wood, but was in reinforced concrete. Imagine what would come out. And so also with regard to the lights, one must study them on the spot. Fortunately today there is modeling, and this allows you to achieve photographic images that manage to predict what can be achieved. And I hope it is the only way to create communication between the designer and the performer of the work, the worker or engineer who directs the work. But I always remain of the conviction that the engineer must work with the workers. When I was a freelancer, I tried in one case to ask to remain on site as a worker. The end of the world happened. They got scared, as if I wanted to control anything, but I was just a way to communicate better. Whatever you say, with black and white wire drawings, you cannot communicate in an architectural environment. Here we see the case of the Cathedral of Bari that had been detected with photogrammetry by the city police of Bari in the 80s. Now, with stereometric modeling, we can reconstruct the photographed environment, and the difference between photography and the virtual model, which obviously is not as faithful as the photographic image, is that the virtual model can be changed, it can be taken apart, can be seen from any point of view. Whatever it is, this is the bare minimum for any building transformation intervention.